The cemetery sat on the edge of Charlotte, where the city ran out of patience and money for landscaping. Grass grew in uneven patches, trees leaned a little too far, and the headstones were small and plain, pressed into the cold ground like afterthoughts. Malcolm Hayes sat on the damp bench as if he had been poured into it, shoulders straight, spine military stiff, hands loose on his knees. Only his eyes moved, resting on the short stone in front of him. Rex's faithful friend. The carved letters were simple, but his fingers traced them like they were the names of fallen soldiers. In his right hand, he held a worn leather collar with a dented metal tag. He studied it for a long beat, then reached forward and laid it carefully on top of the headstone, as if he were placing it on a folded flag. Wind pushed across the hill, sharp enough to sting his eyes. He did not blink. Across town, in a bar with neon lights and sticky floors, a television above the bottles showed a different kind of funeral. Two men in shackles stepped into view, orange jumpsuits stark against the gray of the federal courthouse. A lower third banner rolled across the screen. Two Charlotte officers sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. The anchor's voice was calm, almost bored. Former officers Gregory Calloway and Anthony Miller were taken into custody following a highly publicized brutality case involving black security consultant Malcolm Hayes. At a table under the TV, a couple of regulars watched with their beers halfway to their mouths. "Damn," one of them muttered, 25 years. For cops. "Shouldn't have done whatever they did," the other replied. "World is changing, man. Cameras everywhere now." Outside that same courthouse, a crowd pressed against metal barricades. Older church ladies in Sunday coats, tired men in union jackets, college kids with cardboard signs. Justice for Malcolm Hayes. "No more corrupt cops," someone chanted, and the crowd picked it up, turning his name into a beat that bounced off the stone columns. But Malcolm was not there. He was in the failing light of the little cemetery, watching a single brown leaf bump against Rex's headstone and roll away. His phone buzzed in his coat pocket. He let it go once, twice, then finally slid it out. The screen lit his face with a cold glow. Jasmine Hayes. "You okay? Call me when you're ready." The gray typing bubble appeared, vanished, then did not return. He stared at the message until it blurred. Jasmine with her suits and her speeches and her faith in courts and committees. Jasmine, who had stood in front of microphones and cameras and said words like accountability and systemic change. The world was calling him a survivor now, a symbol. People he had never met were marching with his name on poster board and hashtags. He had not survived. Something in him had bled out on asphalt that night and never made it to the ambulance. Malcolm locked the phone and slid it back into his pocket without answering. The silence settled around him again, heavier now. He should have felt something like victory. Two men who had believed themselves untouchable were being walked into a cage. The system had finally cracked its own, but his chest felt hollow, like someone had kicked out the supports and left the shell standing. He could still see their faces in his mind. Calloway, smirking in the alley light. Miller, laughing on his porch that first week he moved in, like they were neighbors instead of a warning. Then the way both of them had looked at him when they realized who they were really dealing with. They thought they were the hunters, he thought. They never even checked the tags on the prey. A car engine hummed somewhere beyond the trees. Malcolm leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped so tight the knuckles whitened. For a second, he thought of saying nothing at all, just standing up and walking away, letting the stone and the collar and the cold keep the rest of the story. Instead, he cleared his throat, the sound rough in the quiet. "They will never touch anyone again," he said softly. The words seemed to hang in the air, then sink into the ground. He swallowed, jaw working. "But I am not sure what that makes me now." The admission surprised him. Out there, in interviews and statements, everything had sounded so clean. Evidence, law, consequences. In here, sitting alone with a name carved in stone, the edges were not clean at all. Beyond the rusted iron gate, a patrol car rolled past on the road, slow and unhurried. The red and blue lights spun lazily across the darkening sky, washing over the cemetery fence in a brief, haunting sweep. Out of reflex, Malcolm's shoulders tightened. For a heartbeat, he could feel it again. Command decisions, target lists, the weight of a rifle that was no longer in his hands but still lived in his muscles. The cruiser kept going, turned the corner, vanished. The glow faded from the gate, but the feeling did not. The system was still out there, circling the city like it always had. Sirens, badges, radios, reports. Home to some people. To Malcolm Hayes, sitting in the cold with his hand resting on a dog's collar, it would never be home again. He stayed until the sky went from purple to black, until his breath came out in visible clouds, until the sounds of the city turned distant and thin. Only then did he stand, touch the headstone once more, and walk back toward the gate, leaving the collar where it lay. Whatever had happened that night on the quiet street, whatever he had done after, it was finished for Calloway and Miller. For Malcolm, it was only the beginning. The question came on a quiet Sunday, while the coffee was still hot and the eggs were getting cold. Jasmine stood at Malcolm's kitchen counter with a stack of printed case files in one hand, phone face up on the granite. The headline on the screen showed a blurry, still image of a black man pressed against a hood, an officer's arm across his neck. She tapped the phone with her nail. If something like this ever happens to you, what are you going to do? Malcolm looked up from his plate. Sunlight from the back window cut across his face, catching the faint scar at his temple that strangers always asked about, and he never really explained. Do about what about this, Jasmine said. About them. About cops who see you coming and only see a problem. He shrugged once, small and controlled. I will do what I am supposed to do. Stay calm, comply. Let the system work. Jasmine let out a short breath that was almost a laugh. You sound like a brochure. I sound like someone who has been in worse situations than a traffic stop, Malcolm replied. You follow the rules, you document everything, you stay alive. The rest you fight on paper. You really believe that he nodded without hesitation. I know how this country works. It is messy, it is slow, but if you keep your head and you do everything right, you leave them no room. No room for what? To turn you into something you are not. He held her gaze until she looked away. Later that morning, the house felt like a catalog photo. White walls, framed certificates from Fort Bragg, now Fort Liberty, a shadow box with a folded flag, and a row of ribbons he never talked about. The only thing out of place was the large dog bed in the corner and the toys scattered around it. Rex paced by the door, nails clicking against the hardwood, ears up with anticipation. All right, Malcolm said, reaching for the leash. Morning run. Then you sleep all day and pretend you worked for it. Outside, the cul-de-sac was quiet. Lawns were trimmed to regulation length. Mailboxes matched. Flags hung from perfect angles. Malcolm started at an easy jog, Rex trotting at his side. Head high, stride confident. A woman in yoga pants opened her SUV, pausing when she saw him. She forced a tight smile. Malcolm lifted a hand in greeting. Her smile did not quite reach her eyes. At the far end of the street, his neighbor Doug knelt beside a flower bed, hands in the dirt. White guy, late 50s, soft belly, golf shirt with a local bank logo. Morning Mal, he called out as Malcolm slowed. Morning Doug. Doug straightened, brushing off his knees. His gaze flicked from Malcolm to Rex, then up at the two-story house behind them. So you renting, or you bought this place? The question was casual on the surface, tossed out as if he were asking about the weather. Malcolm heard the weight under it anyway. He had heard versions of it since he was old enough to ride the bus alone. Bought, he said. 30-year mortgage. Same as you. Doug chuckled. A little too loud. Hey, that is good, man. That is good. Not everybody around here can say that Malcolm smiled because it was easier than pointing out what Doug really meant. Rex shifted closer to his leg. Malcolm gave the leash a small squeeze, the silent signal that everything was fine. Back inside, the day fell into a pattern so familiar it could have been a drill. Emails from a security contractor in Houston, a Zoom call with a corporate client about emergency response protocols, a quiet hour at the kitchen table reviewing a risk assessment for a hospital in Atlanta. This was the work he had traded combat deployments for. No more sand, no more 3 a.m. helicopter rotors, no more briefings where the phrase acceptable losses was ever allowed to exist. Now he sold what he used to give for free. Threat analysis, contingency plans, training modules. In those old missions, chaos had been the default. No law, no real chain of command outside their own unit. He had seen what the world looked like with no rules at all, and he had sworn that when he came home, he would live as close to the rule book as a man could. If you are disciplined enough, the world cannot move you. That was the story he told himself. That night, Jasmine's files were still on his counter. She came by after court, loosened her heels, and poured herself more coffee than was healthy. "You know what kills me," she said, flipping through photos from one of her cases. "Half these men said the same thing you just did. They thought if they were polite enough, if they kept their voices low, if they said sir at the right time, they would be safe." Malcolm leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Respect cannot fix everything, but it gives you leverage. The camera sees that he answered. She snapped the folder shut. "Mnhinho so chimwai ngai ruije." They do not always care if you are respectful, Mal. They might not, he said, but the camera does. The law does. "I know how to play by the rules." Jasmine watched him for a long moment. "You really think the rules see the same thing when they look at you as when they look at Doug next door?" Malcolm hesitated, just for a heartbeat. Then he nodded once. "If I keep my head, if I control what I do and what I say, they do not get to write the whole story. That is the point." "That is a nice theory," she said quietly. "I just hope you never have to test it." What he did not say was that he had already tested versions of it in other countries. He had walked into warlords' compounds with steady hands and a calm voice, and he had walked back out alive because he could control himself faster than the other man could lose control. Here in this suburb, with its trimmed hedges and slow mail trucks, he believed that same skill would be enough. The only thing that really scared him sat somewhere he never admitted out loud. It was not death. He had made peace with that a long time ago in places where death was just another piece of the scenery. What scared him was how fast a life like his could be erased. One shaky phone video, cut in half, a few seconds of him raising his voice or tensing his shoulders, and suddenly he was not Malcolm Hayes, decorated veteran and security expert. He was just another angry black man on the evening news, stripped of context, flattened into a headline. All those years of discipline, the medals, the clearances, the training, it would all disappear the second someone decided they preferred the simple version of him. That fear kept his voice even when he wanted to shout. It kept his hands open when his instincts screamed for fists. It kept him believing that if he stayed inside the lines would at least keep their shape. Late afternoon, the sky over the cul-de-sac turned honey gold. Kids rode bikes in lopsided circles. Someone grilled in a backyard, the smell of charcoal drifting over fences. Malcolm clipped the leash onto Rex's collar. "Come on, buddy." Last walk of the day. They moved down the sidewalk in an easy rhythm, the way they had dozens of times before. One man, one dog, footprints and paw prints lining up in the soft dust. Here I am, just a guy walking his dog, he thought. Nothing more. At the end of the street, where the pavement curved toward the main road, a car turned the corner a little too slowly. Its engine idled, unhurried. Malcolm did not look up. Far behind him, just out of his line of sight, a wash of muted color flickered across the houses. Red, then blue, then red again, faint against the early evening light. The first sweep of a patrol car's lights beginning to paint the street. The street was quiet enough that Malcolm could hear the soft jingle of Rex's tags with every step. The sun was sliding down behind the houses, sky awash of orange and pink, porch lights clicking on one by one. It was the kind of evening suburbs were built for. He saw the cruiser before he heard it. A black and white at the far end of the block, easing around the corner a little too slowly, engine barely above a purr. Rex's ears twitched. The dog glanced back once, then kept walking. The car pulled alongside them, matching their pace. The passenger window rolled down with an electric whine. "Afternoon, sir." The voice was light, almost friendly. Malcolm stopped, turned toward it, shoulders loose, hands visible at his sides. "Afternoon, officer." The driver had sandy hair, buzzed short, crow's feet that did not match his age, and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. Gregory Calloway, according to the nameplate, catching the last light. His left hand rested on the steering wheel. His right sat close to his belt. His partner, Anthony Miller, was already out of the car. He came around the front bumper, boots crunching on gravel, posture forward, eyes moving over Malcolm like he was scanning for defects. "You live around here?" Calloway asked, head tilting just a fraction. "Yes, sir." Malcolm kept his voice even. "Just up the street." "That right," Miller said. "Funny. Do not think I have seen you before." Malcolm offered a small, polite nod. "I travel for work. Security consulting. I just got back." The words felt rehearsed, because they were. This was the script Jasmine had drilled into him. Calm, clear, respectful, Consulting Calloway repeated. That like mall cop or what private sector risk assessment Malcolm said. Training, emergency protocols. Nothing exciting. Calloway's smile flickered. We got a call about someone looking suspicious in the neighborhood, he said. Figured we would check it out. Suspicious. On this empty, well-kept street with its wreaths and welcome mats. I was just walking my dog, Malcolm replied. I did not realize that was a problem. You would be surprised what folks get nervous about these days, Calloway said lightly. Miller's gaze dropped to Rex. The dog stood at Malcolm's side, relaxed but alert, eyes moving between the two men. That is a big dog, Miller said. He trained, yes, sir. Obedience, protection. He follows commands. Trained for protection, Miller repeated, lips twisting. Sounds like trouble if you ask me. Rex shifted half a step toward Malcolm, picking up the change in the air. Malcolm felt the tension in the leash and gave the slightest tug. Easy, Rex. Down. The dog dropped immediately, elbows to pavement, eyes still locked on the officers. Calloway watched the exchange with a little smirk. Dog like that is a liability, he said. One wrong move, things go bad fast. Malcolm heard the warning under the words. His training ticked through the details. Distance between them. Hand positions. The angle of the cruiser blocking part of his exit path. Calloway's stance was not de-escalation, it was theater. Miller's hand hovered an inch from his holster, fingers flexing. Something's off, Malcolm thought. They are not trying to calm this down. They are trying to build it up. I'm going to need to see some ID, Calloway said. Of course. Malcolm moved slow, narrating each motion like Jasmine had taught him. My wallet is in my back pocket. I'm going to reach for it with my right hand. All right. Miller's jaw clenched. Just do it. And keep that dog still. Rex stayed down. Malcolm pulled his wallet out, held it between two fingers, offering it handle first. Calloway took his time. He barely glanced at the name and address before handing it over to Miller, who flipped it open like he expected to find a confession tucked behind the license. Well, look at that, he said. Our guy's a soldier, former Malcolm corrected gently. Delta Force Miller read, brows lifting. That's supposed to impress us, Malcolm met his eyes. It is just what I did. Now I work in security. Same thing I told you. Calloway stepped closer, close enough that Malcolm could feel his breath. See, here's the thing he said. Folks around here, they pay a lot to feel safe. When they call us because somebody they do not recognize is walking around with a big dog, we have to pay attention. That is the job. I understand, Malcolm said. I live here. My address is on that ID. Then you will not mind answering a few more questions, Calloway replied. I believe I already have. Miller let out a short, humorless laugh. Guy seems tense to me. You tense, Mr. Hayes? No, sir. You sure about that? Because your dog looks tense. Hand moved closer to gun. I am thinking maybe this situation is headed in a bad direction. Malcolm felt his pulse tick up, not from fear, but from how painfully predictable this was becoming. He thought of Jasmine's files, of all the men who had thought staying calm would save them. Officers. I am standing still, he said. My dog is on a leash. I have shown you my ID. What else do you need from me? Calloway's smile died. His eyes hardened. I need you to turn around and put your hands behind your back. For our safety. I have not done anything. Then you got nothing to worry about. The line was so familiar, it might as well have been printed on the side of the car. Malcolm did not move. Every nerve in his body screamed that if he turned his back now, they would write the rest of this however they wanted. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Miller's shoulders tighten, hand dropping fully to the grip of his weapon. Sir, there is no cause to detain me, Malcolm said quietly. Please do not escalate this. Escalate, Miller snapped. You see me escalate. He stepped in, hand snapping toward Malcolm's wrist, fingers clamping down harder than they needed to. Rex erupted in a single bark, deep and sharp, hauling himself up despite the command to stay down. He did not lunge. He did not clamp his jaws. He moved just enough to put his body between Malcolm and the threat. Time folded. Miller's face flashed something that was not fear so much as anticipation. Gun. The word was more instinct than thought. His weapon was out before Malcolm could finish saying Rex's name. The shot cracked the quiet wide open. For a moment, there was no sound at all. No wind, no distant lawnmower, no traffic hum. Just the echo of it ringing inside Malcolm's skull. The leash jerked once in his hand, then went slack. He turned. Rex was on his side, legs twitching, chest heaving in tiny broken pulls. His eyes, those smart, steady eyes, were wide, searching for him. No. The word tore out of Malcolm's throat, raw and unfamiliar. He dropped to his knees so hard they stung, hands going automatically to the place where fur was already darkening, hot and wet. Hey, I got you. Stay with me. Buddy, you are okay. You are okay. He knew he was lying. He had seen this too many times on other bodies in other countries. The mind begged for time the body did not have. Above him, Miller's voice sounded distant. Told you that mutt was a problem. Malcolm could not make out the rest. His world had shrunk to the weight in his arms, and the way Rex's breaths came shorter, more shallow, until there was a pause that stretched too long, then nothing. The silence after was worse than the gunshot. He did not remember rising. One moment he was on the ground, the next he was moving, something in him surging toward the men who had just put a bullet through the only living thing that had never once looked at him with suspicion. You killed him. His voice did not sound like his own. It sounded older, rougher, like gravel. Miller's hand found the taser this time. Bright wires, a pop like a cheap firework, then white pain slammed into Malcolm's back, flooding every nerve with fire. His muscles seized, knocked him off his feet. He hit the pavement face first, unable to even catch himself. He could feel distantly the weight of a knee driving between his shoulder blades, pinning him down. Hands yanked his arms back, metal biting his wrists. Yeah, that is right, Calloway's voice said above him. Satisfied. That is where you belong. All the rules, all the drills, all the neat little lines he had drawn for himself in Chapter 2 of his life, shattered under the pressure of that knee. It did not matter that he had said sir. It did not matter that he had moved slow, that he had narrated every reach, that he had swallowed every spike of anger. He had done everything right, and Rex was still dead, and he was the one eating asphalt. They booked him like any other suspect. Mugshot, ink on fingers, the cold burn of fluorescent lights. No one offered an apology. No one said the word mistake. By the time Jasmine stormed into the station, her heels echoing off tile, Malcolm had stopped shaking from the taser, but not from the anger. "Get your hands off my client," she snapped, voice sharp enough to cut. "You are done holding him." Calloway leaned against a wall, face blank, only the tightness around his eyes betraying anything. "Relax, counselor," he said. "Just doing our jobs." "Your job is about to be explaining this to Internal Affairs," Jasmine shot back, "and the media, and probably a federal judge." Outside in the parking lot, she finally let herself look at Malcolm's face. Bruised, tired, eyes too calm. "Tell me exactly what happened," she said. "Every word, Mal." He did. Start to finish. No edits, no bravado. Just facts. When he finished, Jasmine's jaw was set so tight it looked like it hurt. "Okay," she said. "Here is what we are going to do. IA investigation. We request the body cam footage. We get statements. We line up witnesses. You did everything right, and this time the record is going to show it. The camera does," he repeated softly. "The law does." He needed to believe it, because without that belief, there was nothing between him and the part of himself that had once been very good at ending problems permanently. For a few days, he clung to that belief like a life raft. Then Jasmine came back with a manila folder and a look he had never seen on her face before. She sat at his kitchen table, dropped the file between them. Internal Affairs closed the case. Already. Use of force justified. Officer in fear for his life. He opened the folder. The report was neat, clinical. It described Rex as aggressive. It said the dog had lunged. It said Malcolm had become combative. There is no way the cameras show that he said, voice flat. About that, Jasmine said quietly. Calloway's body cam was off. Miller's malfunctioned. Dash cam angle was blocked by a parked SUV. They are going off the officer's statements. He stared at her. So they get to write it, he said. They get to decide who I was on that street. Jasmine swallowed. We can still push, she said quickly. We take this public. Press conferences, civil suit. We bring in the NAACP, every watchdog group I know. We make noise they cannot ignore. Malcolm looked at the neat paragraphs lying about him in black and white. He thought about Rex, the warmth leaving his body on cold pavement. He thought about Calloway's knee, Miller's smirk. When he spoke, his voice was so steady it scared her. I did everything right, Jazz. I did everything your way. He is still dead. I still went to jail. She opened her mouth, closed it again. For the first time since she was a teenager in mock trial, she had nothing ready to argue. Mal, this is how we fight, she said. We push the system until it cracks. That is what I know how to do. He met her eyes. His had gone from burning to something else now. Not cooler, exactly. Just harder. You fight it your way, he said. I am not sure I can anymore. She saw it then. The subtle shift. Like watching a door close in slow motion from the other side of the room. Do not do anything stupid, she whispered. He almost smiled. You spent your whole life telling me I was the smart one, remember? That night, the house felt too big. The TV was off. The lights were low. The only thing on the kitchen table was Rex's leash, coiled in a loose circle. Malcolm stood over it for a long time. Then he sat, picked it up, wrapped the leather around his fist until it bit into his skin. If the system will not fix this, he said into the dark, then I will. The words were quiet. They did not echo. They did not need to. On some street in Charlotte, a patrol car rolled by. Siren off, lights off, just another piece of the city's nervous system humming in the background. On this side of the glass, a man who had spent most of his life operating in other countries finally decided what kind of operator he was going to be at home. Sleep stopped feeling like rest and started feeling like an ambush. When Malcolm did manage to drift off, it never lasted long. The dreams came in pieces, Rex's tags jingling, the click of a holster, a single bark, then the sound that split his world in half. He would jerk awake to the echo of the gunshot, chest tight, hand reaching for a weapon that was not there. Darkness, quiet, just the house and the hum of the fridge. He tried the pills Jasmine had pushed across the table one night, labeled in her neat handwriting with dosage times. They knocked him down, but the dreams just came quicker, thicker. The numbness scared him more than the pain. After 3 nights, he flushed the rest and decided he would rather be exhausted and awake than sedated and lost. The neighborhood noticed before anyone said anything. Some mornings when Malcolm stepped out to get the paper, he could feel eyes on him. Curtains shifted and stilled. A woman walking her golden retriever crossed the street earlier than she needed to, leash held tight, gaze straight ahead. At the mailbox, an older man Malcolm only knew as Tom with the boat slowed his pickup, rolled down the window halfway. Hey, Malcolm, he called. Heard about what happened. That is real unfortunate. Malcolm nodded once. Yeah, it is. Tom hesitated. His mouth opened, closed, then settled on the safer path. You had that dog trained different or something. He looked like one of those attacked dogs. He was my dog, Malcolm said. That is it. Tom blinked, gave an awkward thumbs up, and drove off. A couple down the street avoided even that much. The husband stared openly whenever Malcolm walked by, the kind of look that said he had already picked a side in a story he only knew through rumor and evening news phrasing. Aggressive black man, dangerous dog, officer in fear for his life. The narrative was simple. People liked simple. On the 4th day, the doorbell rang. When Malcolm opened it, the smell of cinnamon and butter hit him first. A short, heavy-set woman with silver hair and skin as dark as his mother's stood on the porch, holding a foil-covered pie dish in both hands. You gone, just let me stand out here all day, baby, she said, eyebrow raised. He stepped back automatically. Mrs. Turner, I am sorry. Come in. Evelyn Turner had lived in the neighborhood since before the new houses and the new money. She had been the first one to wave when he moved in. She was also the only one who had shown up on his doorstep now. She set the pie on the counter and turned to look at him fully. Her gaze was sharp, taking in the dark circles under his eyes, the stiffness in his shoulders. You look like you have been fighting in your sleep, she said. How are you holding up? I am fine, she snorted. No, you are not. Sit down. He obeyed before he realized he was doing it. Old habits of respecting elders died harder than military ones. Evelyn folded her hands on the table. Baby, they have been doing this since before you were born. Since before I was born. You are not crazy. You are just seeing it clearly now. He let out a breath through his nose. "I knew it was bad. Knowing and feeling it in your bones are two different things," she said. "I watched them take your dog on the news and still find a way to make you the question mark. That kind of thing will rot you from the inside if you let it." "What am I supposed to do with that?" Malcolm asked quietly. She studied him for a long moment. "That is the part I cannot answer for you, Malcolm Hayes. I can only tell you this is not new. You are standing in a story that is older than both of us. Do not let them make you forget who you were before they wrote you into their version." At the courthouse, Jasmine tried to live in her version. Her office was a cramped rectangle in a downtown building that always smelled faintly like dust and stale coffee. The walls were lined with case files and framed degrees. Her colleagues knew her as the one who never flinched, who quoted constitutional amendments like scripture, who believed that somewhere inside the mess, the law could still be pushed into doing the right thing. Now, between court hearings and client calls, she would catch herself staring at Malcolm's mugshot on her computer screen, the one taken with Rex's blood still on his shirt, the one where his eyes looked through the camera like it was just another optical device in a hostile zone. Her paralegal, Tiana, knocked once and slid a manila envelope onto her desk. "Citizen complaints on Calloway and Miller, like you asked," Tiana said. "Some of these are ugly." Jasmine flipped through pages of photographs and affidavits. Bruised ribs, split lips, young men with eyes full of humiliation and rage. She had believed for a long time that stacking enough of these would tilt the scale. Now, with her own brother's name on a closed IA file, she was not as sure. The tools in her hand suddenly felt smaller. At night, back at Malcolm's house, the two worlds collided. "You cannot just disappear, Mal," she said one evening as he pulled on a jacket. "I'm just going for a drive. You have been going for a lot of drives." He did not argue. He parked a few blocks away from the precinct the first night just to see. The cruiser numbers were visible as officers came and went. He watched long enough to clock the recurring pattern. Calloway and Miller. Same unit, same patrol window. He wrote it down in a small notebook, the same kind he had once used to jot down patrol routes in Kandahar. The next night, he followed from a distance. No closer than 2 cars back. No sudden turns. No broken lights, just a shadow. He watched them pull over a black teenager in an old sedan near a strip mall. Watched Calloway lean into the driver's window, hand planted on the roof, body language casual but invasive. Watched Miller stand behind, wide stance, hand resting on his gun like it was part of his anatomy. He scribbled time, location, description, approximate age, and race of the driver. He wrote down how long the stop took, whether they searched the car, whether the kid drove away or got hauled off. When they rolled past the community center on the east side, Malcolm caught sight of a familiar figure exiting the attached boxing gym. Taryn Briggs. Big man with heavier shoulders now, a few more lines around his eyes, but still moving like every step was a fight he had already decided he would win. He ran a free youth program there, gave kids a place to hit a bag instead of each other. A year ago, Calloway and Miller had arrested Taryn on a trumped-up resisting charge. Malcolm remembered seeing the photos of the bruises in Jasmine's file. Now, as the cruiser slowed, Calloway's gaze lingered on Taryn a beat too long. Taryn met it head-on, chin lifting a fraction. The car moved on. Malcolm wrote that down too. On another night, they hit a familiar address, a narrow apartment complex off Wilkinson Boulevard. Dwayne Carter lived there, a long-haul trucker who had once told Jasmine in a deposition that Calloway and Miller beat him in a holding cell after a bogus gun accusation. This time, they just knocked on his door and asked questions. Malcolm could not hear the words from his parked car, but he saw the way Dwayne's shoulders slumped in the doorway, hands raised in that instinctive gesture of someone who knew resistance could get him killed. The notebook filled quickly. He did not rush. He did not confront. He watched. He gathered. It felt familiar in a way that was both comforting and terrifying. Inside the department, the ripples had started. You hear about Hayes' one young officer whispered near the vending machines, unaware that Calloway was a few feet away. Dude was Delta Force. That is what Miller said. "If I ever get caught in some mess like that, I am done," another muttered. "The brass is not going to cover for us if it gets loud enough." Calloway walked past them, jaw tight. The whispers went quiet until he was gone, then hissed back to life. Around the squad room, people lowered their voices when his name came up, but the laughter did not disappear entirely. After shift, he and Miller still hit the bar near the highway, still slapped backs and told stories too loud, still wore their badges like armor. Untouchable. Or at least, they believed they were. One night, Malcolm sat alone in the back corner of that bar, hood up, baseball cap pulled low. The place smelled like fried food and spilled beer. TVs on the walls cycled between sports highlights and cable news. Calloway was at the counter wrapping up a joke that made Miller throw his head back and laugh. The bartender poured refills without asking. Malcolm lifted the small camera to his eye, adjusting the zoom until Calloway's face filled the frame. The half smile, the easy arrogance, the way he gestured like the room belonged to him. He snapped a still, then another. "You think this is still your city?" he murmured under his breath. Calloway tipped his glass back, oblivious, bathing in the comfort of men who had never been told no for real. Malcolm lowered the camera, the weight of it solid in his hand. He did not know yet exactly how he was going to dismantle them. Law, exposure, fear, something else entirely. All he knew was that the part of him that had once planned raids in foreign countries had finally picked a target at home. The first wave of consequences had rolled through his life and left cracks everywhere. Sleep, trust, neighborly small talk, Jasmine's certainty in the courtroom, even the way he looked at his own reflection. The second wave was coming. This time, he would be the one deciding where it hit. The alley behind the bar smelled like stale beer and hot trash. Calloway stumbled out the back door alone, laughing to himself, one hand braced on the brick wall. Malcolm stepped out of the shadows like he was walking into a room he already owned. No warning, no shout, just a sharp kick to the ribs that folded Calloway sideways, breath blasting from his lungs in a broken grunt. Before he could yell, Malcolm grabbed a fistful of his jacket and bounced the back of his head off the wall. Not hard enough to kill, hard enough to erase any doubt about who was in control. Calloway's hand scrabbled at his arm. Who the hell? Malcolm leaned in close, cap low, face turned just out of the light. "You do not get to know who I am," he murmured. "Not yet." He dropped him, let him hit the ground, then drove one more precise punch into his side, right where the first kick had landed. "This is the last time you walk away from something like this." Then he was gone, melted back into the dark. By the time Calloway could stand, bleeding and shaking, the alley was empty. He called Miller with his voice rattling. "He knew my name," Greg said. "He knew everything." Miller swore, promised they would find whoever did this, promised they were not going to let some thugs scare them off their own streets. The next day, they walked into Taryn Briggs' boxing gym like they still owned the city. Sweat and leather hung in the air, kids working heavy bags freezing when they saw the uniforms. "You remember the last time we were here?" Calloway asked, smiling without warmth. "You remember how fast we can make things go bad for you?" Taryn wiped his face with a towel and stepped between them and the boys. "I remember filing a complaint you buried," he said. "I remember that." The teens watched, wide-eyed. Their faces said what none of them dared to say out loud. If they can do this to him, what chance do we have? That night, they pounded on Dwayne Carter's door until he opened in a tank top and sweatpants, confusion turning to dread the moment he saw their faces. "You got a lot of big friends," Dwayne Miller said. "Anybody mad enough to jump a cop in an alley?" Dwayne's eyes flicked past them to the stairwell camera Malcolm had installed for the landlord months ago as a side job. Malcolm watched from his parked car across the lot, lens trained on the hallway, audio recorder catching every thinly veiled threat. The file in his laptop grew heavier. The riskiest part came last. He left his porch light on, left an empty whiskey bottle on the table, left the safe in his bedroom not quite closed. The front door lock clicked, but only once. Any halfway trained eye would call it sloppy. He knew whose eyes would be looking. It did not take long. A quiet knock. No answer. The handle turned. Calloway first, Miller behind him. Weapons holstered, arrogance not. Malcolm waited in the living room in a t-shirt and sweatpants, feigning surprise just long enough for them to feel bold. "You think you can come after us and there is no payback," Miller hissed, shoving him in the chest. "You think you can play soldier with cops." He did not fight back. Not once. Every shove, every punch, every slam into the wall played directly into the hidden camera's view. He let the blood run. Let the bruise bloom under his eye. Let them write their own indictment with their hands. When it was over and they finally stormed out, pleased with themselves, he sat on the floor for a long time, listening to his own breathing. Jasmine nearly broke the door down 24 hours later. "Oh my God, Mal." Her fingers hovered over the purple swelling on his cheekbone, the split in his lip, the way he moved like his ribs hurt. "Tell me you did not set this up," she said, voice shaking. "Tell me you did not bait them into this." He held her gaze. "I knew they would come," he said. "I made sure they would not bring a gun this time." "That is not an answer. It is the only one I have." She stared at him, tears bright and furious. "This is what they do," she whispered. "They push us until we either break or become exactly what they say we are." Malcolm did not apologize, did not defend himself. He just walked past her to the kitchen table, where his laptop sat open. He rewound the footage, watched himself get hit, watched Calloway's face twist with satisfaction, watched Miller step over the line again and again. His own expression, even under the blows, was terrifyingly calm. He queued the files, attached them to emails already drafted. Internal affairs. A civil rights attorney in Atlanta Jasmine had once mentioned. 2 local reporters. 3 national watchdog groups. His finger hovered for half a second. Then he hit send. Somewhere inside the department's server, a storm siren started to wail. The interrogation room felt like every room Malcolm had ever cleared overseas. 4 walls, 1 door, 1 man pretending to have more power than he really did. Captain Harold Monroe dropped a thick file on the metal table and sat. White, late 50s, tie pulled loose, eyes that had seen too many headlines. "You know why you are here. Mr. Hayes." "I have a guess," Malcolm said. "2 of my officers get jumped in separate incidents," Monroe said. "Both of them say the same name. Yours. You got any idea how bad that looks?" Malcolm held his stare. "Got any evidence? It was me." Monroe opened his mouth, then his phone lit up and started vibrating. Then the landline on the wall rang. Outside, voices rose, hurried, overlapping. He answered once, twice, listening in tight silence. When he hung up, his jaw was clenched. "Those emails you sent," he said slowly. "You did not just send them to IA?" "No, I did not. Body cam failures, old complaints, your home footage. It is all over the department network. And the press. And 3 civil rights groups." Monroe rubbed his temples. "You lit a fire under this place." "I gave you matches and dry wood," Malcolm replied. "What you do with it is on you." Monroe looked at him for a long time, something like reluctant respect flickering under the frustration. "You are free to go," he said at last. "Off the record, if I do not suspend those 2 tonight, this whole building burns down." So he did. Not because the system wanted justice, but because it was bleeding and needed to stop the loss. On television, Calloway and Miller were no longer swaggering in uniform. They were flanked by lawyers, faces tight, wives and kids shoved past cameras while protesters chanted on their lawns. Malcolm watched the coverage in silence, the signs, the shouting, the shaking hands of 2 men who finally understood what it meant to be hunted. For the first time, a small thought slid in sideways. I am using fear too, not the way they had. He had never stopped a kid on a corner, never shoved anyone just to prove he could. He had targeted exactly 2 men and taken them apart with the same precision he used to put missions together. But the feeling on their faces, that wide-eyed panic, was familiar. At a quiet cafe uptown a week later, he felt someone watching him. He turned and saw Calloway in the doorway. No badge, no gun, just a man in a wrinkled polo who had aged 10 years in 10 days. "You think you are any better than me?" Calloway asked. "You hunted me." Malcolm set his coffee down. "Difference is, I hunted the guilty," he said. "You never cared who was who." Calloway flinched, but he did not argue. That night, back home, Malcolm stood in front of the bathroom mirror, the scar at his temple, the framed photo of Rex on the shelf, the old Delta Force mission coin he kept in a dish by the sink. War there, war here. For the first time, he could not tell where one ended and the other began. The courtroom felt like it had its own gravity. Malcolm sat at the witness stand, right hand raised, eyes fixed on some middle distance only he could see. "Mr. Hayes, can you describe what happened the night your dog was shot?" He swallowed once. "I was walking Rex," he said. "We had done that route 100 times. They pulled up, asked questions. I answered all of them. I said, "Sir." I showed my ID. I told them I lived there. His hand stayed flat on the rail, but his knuckles were white. Then they told me to turn around and put my hands behind my back. I hesitated. Not because I wanted to fight, because I have been in enough bad situations to know when somebody's already written the ending. He stared past the prosecutor now, past the jury. Miller grabbed my wrist. Rex moved half a step. One bark. That was it. Then the shot. The room was so quiet, the air felt heavy. I knelt in the street holding him while he died, Malcolm said. And while I was doing that, they were calling me boy and telling me where I belonged. He didn't raise his voice. That made it worse. He walked them through the rest, the taser, the knee in his back, the night they came into his home and turned his living room into a lesson. The footage had already played. His words were the part the cameras couldn't catch. Older black folks in the gallery sat very still, faces lined with memories they hadn't asked to revisit. Some stared at the floor. Some stared at Calloway and Miller like they were looking at history refusing to retire. The verdict came an hour after closing arguments. On the charges of aggravated assault, illegal entry, falsifying reports, the jury finds the defendants guilty. It wasn't a TV moment. No cheering, no fist bumps. Just a long exhale that seemed to come from 100 different chests at once. The judge's voice was almost tired when he read the sentence. 25 years in federal custody. No parole. For a second, no one moved. A whole generation in that room just went quiet. The price for Calloway and Miller was obvious. The price for Malcolm took longer to tally. Cable shows ran his face anytime a new police video dropped. Security expert and police brutality survivor Malcolm Hayes joins us. Strangers stopped him in grocery stores to tell him they were proud of him. Others muttered that he had ruined good cops' lives. Clients called less. Corporate boards didn't say too political. They said, not the right fit right now. He opened articles about himself and found the word activist dropped in like a second name he had never agreed to. At Jasmine's place, after the sentencing, they sat on her worn couch with takeout growing cold. "You did something huge, Mal," she said quietly. "There are lawyers who will be quoting this case for the next 20 years. He nodded once. "But," she added, "you also did things that, if a cop had done them, I would have sued them into the ground." He looked at her, no anger in it. "I know." They both understood, without saying it, that whatever they'd been before this, just a big sister and little brother arguing over college choices and bad dates, was gone. Later that night, Malcolm sat alone in his living room, the TV's glow bouncing off framed photos on the wall. On screen, Calloway and Miller were being led down a hallway in orange, wrists chained, eyes hollow. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "This is what you earned," he said softly. His face didn't show triumph. Just the flat, tired look of a man who had gotten what he wanted and realized the road there had taken something he couldn't get back. The grass around Rex's grave had finally grown in. The little cemetery outside Charlotte was greener now than it had been that first cold evening. Someone had fixed the broken fence. The city had sent a mower once or twice. Time had moved, even if it did not feel like it. Malcolm stood for a long moment before he sat, lowering himself onto the same worn bench as before. He rested his forearms on his knees, hands clasped, looking at the small headstone. "Rex, faithful friend, hey," he said quietly. "Been a minute." The wind answered first, a soft push through the trees. Somewhere across town, traffic buzzed on the interstate. Out here, it was just him and the stone. So, he started, like he was catching an old friend up on gossip. "They are gone. Calloway and Miller. Federal orange. 25 years. No way out." He traced the edge of the collar he had left on the stone months ago. The leather had weathered. The metal tag was still solid. "Department is doing the song and dance," he went on. "New policies, new trainings. Captain Monroe standing in front of cameras saying, 'This is not who we are,' while everyone in the city thinks, 'Actually, this is exactly who you were.'" He huffed a breath that was almost a laugh. "Jasmine is busy. Panels, conferences, reform task forces. She is the one they call when they want to look serious now. She hates the politics, but she keeps showing up." He fell quiet, eyes on the dirt at his feet. "Me, though, I still do not sleep right." He did not dress it up for Rex. "No point. I thought for a while that the consequence was them losing everything," he said. "The badges, the pensions, the neighborhood that crossed the street to shake their hands. But that is not the whole bill." He leaned back, looking up at the sky. The rest of it is what I turned myself into to get there. He thought about the files, the planning, the nights he sat in the dark and mapped out a way to rip 2 men out of the system without ever firing a shot. He had not brought a gun to any of it, but it had still been combat. Truth was the weapon, footage, leaks, old complaints he stitched together into something no one could ignore. The videos had not saved him on their own. They had just opened a door. I thought if I could get the facts out, they would do the saving, he said. Turns out the facts do not save anybody. They just give people a chance to do something. Or not. He went quiet again, hearing the echo of his own words. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed and faded. You know what I do not like admitting, he asked the stone. It felt good, watching them fall, watching the same fear they used on us come back on them. He let the admission sit there, heavy. That scares me almost as much as that night. He was not going to rewrite himself as some saint who had only wanted the abstract idea of justice. He had wanted them to hurt. He had wanted them stripped bare in front of the same public they had once patrolled like an empire. I took revenge, he said simply. I just did it by forcing the system to do what it pretends it does on its own. For a man who had once believed in rules as armor, that was its own kind of loss. He looked around at the small, quiet cemetery. A black veteran talking to a dog's grave about the difference between justice and payback in a country that still struggled to tell the two apart. When a system leaves people like us hanging, he said, it is not just unfair. It is stupid. It takes folks who used to protect it, who used to believe in it, and it teaches them how to work around it instead. He thumbed the coin in his pocket, the old Delta Force Challenge coin he still carried. Whole career, I pointed this skill set outward, he said. Other countries, other problems. Never thought I would aim it at the place on my passport. He shook his head, a tired little smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. But here we are. He looked back at the headstone, at the collar, at the small patch of ground holding more of his heart than any human grave ever had. They thought killing you would scare me into silence, he said softly. He stood, joints stiff, and brushed dirt from his palms. All it did was show me who they really were and who I was willing to become. He stood there for another beat, committing the scene to memory. The stone, the collar, the way the late afternoon light hit the grass. Then he turned and walked back toward the gate. No music swelled, no voice told him he had done the right thing. He was just a man with a past, and a choice he had to keep making every day. What to do with the part of himself that had learned how good it felt to win a war, even a necessary one. Behind him, the cemetery went quiet again. If this story hit something in you, if it made you feel angry, or seen, or just a little less alone with what you know about the world, do not let it stop here. Share it with somebody who needs to hear it. Leave a comment, tell us where you are watching from, and subscribe to the channel so these kinds of stories keep getting told louder and louder until the people who need to hear them cannot look away anymore.